Hey, fourth graders, and happy e-learning day. This is Mr. Hoffman, and I'm going to kind of run you through a quick reading lesson as well as talk you through the assignment. I do want to let you know that as I go through the lesson, I'm going to go through the work you're going to have to do today on your reading assignment. So if you want to pause the video and pause the lesson, stop and do that work, and then continue the lesson and pause at those points. You can do that. You can also watch the whole lesson and then go through and rewatch parts you need to and complete the lesson, kind of whatever you need to do. So we're doing CKLA lesson 2. So yesterday we talked about Little Red Riding Hood and did some work with poems with Little Red Riding Hood. Today we're going to look at two poems called Ask Aiden and Wishes. And today's goal is to make inferences about poems using text evidence and to define and identify repetition as well as alliteration. Those are two tools we're going to talk about today. So with key vocabulary, you'll notice that these poems have a dedication. That word dedication is a noun, and it's a note in the book or after the title that shows the author wrote the poem for a special person. So like sometimes they'll say like to my mom, like thank you for always supporting me, or to Shelly, thank you for always encouraging me to be a strong writer. So those are just a couple examples below of like a type of thing that an author may put a dedication into their book just to let like the person know or somebody know like this book is written for them or in their honor. Another key vocabulary word that you're going to need to look at today is called slant rhyme. And that's a noun. And so those are words that share only one final consonant sound, but they're close to a rhyme. And they're really only pretty much used in poetry. So like an example from the song All I Want for Christmas Is You, it says, I don't want a lot for Christmas. There's just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. So need and tree are used as a slant rhyme where need and tree don't rhyme, but they're close enough that they can be used kind of as a rhyme in a poem. And so some of the poems we look at today will use some of those slant rhymes where they don't rhyme exactly, but they're close enough that we can use them as a rhyme in a poem. So there's a couple of things you might need to know throughout the lesson. Today's first poem is going to be it's called Ask Aiden. It's by Harriet Mullen. And just so some things you guys should know about Harriet Mullen, she grew up in Florence, Alabama. And then she was born in like where she, or sorry, she was born there, but then she was kind of raised in Texas. And she was a young Black woman in the South. And a lot of her writing reflects her childhood and growing up and fighting for the rights of people similar to her, and she had a lot of very powerful writing. She has a book called Tree Tall Women, and it considered the lives of Southern Black women. And her collections use a lot of humor and wordplay to discuss some pretty hard topics. She asks a lot of questions in her poems that kind of make people think, especially about equality. And the more that people understand, the richer their lives can become. So Harriet Mullen, very, very popular and inspiring poet. And this poem, this first poem, Ask Aiden, we're going to read is written by her. So as I read the poem, I want you to think about the two following questions. What do all the subjects in the poem have in common? Excuse me. And what do you notice is similar about each line and the questions she asks? So it's a very short 4-line poem. So it says, are aardvarks anxious? Do dragons dream? Ever seen an eager elephant? Newts are never nervous, are they? So again, it's just very short. What you might notice is every line that I have in common is about an animal. So aardvarks are in the first one, then dragons, then elephants, and then newts. So each line is about an animal. And you may have noticed also that each line in the questions repeats a letter or a sound. And that's something we're going to talk about. That's a skill or that's a figurative language piece that poets use called alliteration. So let's talk a little bit about the poem. So you may notice that the line repeats a format with questions, but it also repeats those sounds. So repetition is a super important device that's used in poetry. In the poem, the letters and the sentence structure are repeated. So the fact that they're using a question on every line is repeated, but then you are also using the same repetition in the letters throughout the poem as well. That tool where we repeat the letters is called alliteration. And that is where we repeat the same letter or beginning sound in a line of a poem. So, for example, are aardvarks anxious is words that are repeated with the letter A. Do dragons dream is repeated the letter D. Ever seen an eager elephant? Ever eager an elephant are that E. And then newts are never nervous, are they? Is that letter N. That tool is called alliteration. Again, alliteration is when two or more nearby words have the same beginning sounds. There's a poem called Bedhead. I want to read it. It says, "Milk was spilled, spit, and sputtered," said Dad, surveying the situation from Sinkside. Oliver stared a steely stare at his sister. "A done deal," declared Emily. Oliver hemmed, he hawed, but he knew he had had it. So you can see those underlined sounds. That first line, spilled, spit, sputtered. That's an example of alliteration. Then said, surveying, situation, Sinkside is another example. Each line has its own. Started, steely, stare, sister, in that third line. Done deal, declared, and the fourth line. The next line, hemmed, he, hawed, he, and then the last line, he had had. All H sounds. So poets use this a lot. It helps form a rhythm in the poem. It can also just kind of be a tricky wordplay that makes the poem more interesting to read. But again, I'm going back to all the poem we just read. You see alliteration in each question. It is repeated with the animal, an emotion, or something the animal is doing, where those are repeated sounds. So the first thing you're going to do is work on activity page 2.1. There are some just basic questions about the poem. Number one says the speaker of the poem has chosen a subject in each line. What do all the subjects have in common? We kind of talked about that. And then why might this person be asking all these questions? It's kind of up to you to interpret. Number three asks you to look at the letters of each line of the poem and write a chart below that has your own alliteration examples. So it's asking you to pick an animal, a verb or action word, and then a feeling and write your own alliteration. I have done two for you. If you want to use my examples, you can add those to your chart and do 3 more on your own. If you want to do your own 5 examples, that's fine. The first example I did was I used the letter F and I said fish flip furiously. And then the second one I did, I used the letter, it should be the letter C. Let me correct this on my chart with that. C, and it's cats climb carefully. So that's all letter C words. So you can use those two. If you want to use your own, you can make your own. That's totally up to you. So you can either do 3 more by yourself or you can do 5 on your own, picking your own letters with animals, verbs, and feelings. Remember, verbs are an action word. Make sure that second column is an action word. Flip is an action word. Climb is an action word. After you finish that, we're going to move on and read another poem. So this poem is called Wishes. It's by Norman Alt. And I want you to pay attention to what are some of the similarities and differences between the first poem and this poem. So I'm going to read this one to you. It says, "What do you look for? What do you seek? A silver bird with a golden beak? What do you long for? What do you crave? Golden gems in a silver cave? What do you lack and what do you need? A silver sword and a golden steed. What do you want or what do you dream? A golden ship on a silver stream. What do you have and what do you own? A silver robe and a golden crown. What would you be? Oh, what would you be? Only the king of the land and the sea." So if you notice, this also asks a lot of questions, just like the first poem, but there's not a really pattern of alliteration. And this also answers those questions within the poem. If you look, right, it says, what do you look for? What do you seek? Then he's going to answer it. A silver bird with a golden beak. The next line says, what do you long for? What do you crave? The author's going to answer it. Golden gems in a silver cave is what I crave, right? We looked at poem lines yesterday. If you look, let's count the number of lines. Each line starting here, each question is its own line. Each answer is its own line. So if we count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines in the poem. And then we're looking at stanzas. If you remember, a stanza is a group of lines that go together. This is all just one big stanza, right? There's no split or line breaks that create multiple stanzas. It's one common section with the questions and answers. So Wishes is written in multiple lines, 12 lines, but it's just one stanza, right? Another thing you may notice in the poem is that the author uses images to answer the questions and help the reader picture the poem. So if you're looking at the poem, the images are over on the left. So all of the author's answers are or all the things the author has in here is an answer to the question you have at the top. So, and he's using imagery to kind of help you picture what it is he's doing in each question. So when it's asking, what do you look for and what do you seek? His answer is a silver bird and a golden beak. So you can picture over here the silver bird with a golden beak. The next answer is golden gems in a silver cave to what he wants and he craves. Here's the cave and here's the gold. You notice there's a lot of silver and gold. So I would kind of ask you the question, if he's referring to a lot of silver and golden things, what do you think is important to him in what the way he's answering in these questions? A lot of them have to do with silver and gold and power and being a king. What kind of do you think would lead you to believe? What would you be able to infer about the kind of person who's telling this story? Next up, you're going to answer some questions using the poem Reading Wishes. So number one says, look at the poem's question lines. How many questions are on each line? So if you look at for example, the first line is right here. What do you look for? What do you seek? It's asking you how many questions are in that one line. Then the next line, what do you long for? What do you crave? How many questions are in that one line? Question number two says, what do the questions on line one have in common with each other? So when you're looking at what do you look for? What do you seek? What do those both have in common? Number three says, using different colored lines, mark the end words of each rhyme and sound. So seek and beak, for example, I will help you by doing that one. You would use different colors. I would underline seek and beak in my packet because those two rhyme. Then the next one, what do you crave? And golden gems in a silver cave. I'm going to underline those two. So I've given you two examples. Go through and you're going to underline the rest of them with colors. After you do that, it says, then write the rhyming pairs here. Don't forget to include slant rhymes. So if I had seek and beak, I would put over here seek and beak. And then underneath that, I would put crave and cave. So you would write, I've given you two. You're going to do the rest on your own. Number four says, list three things from the poem or images that the speaker believes he will get when he is king. You'll have to go through and use those lines to infer that and use those clues. And number five says, what would a king do with each of these items? So the three you wrote down here, what would a king do with those items? So it's up to you to answer those questions. You've got to use the poem to help you answer those questions. Again, if you want to pause the video now and do that before you move on to the next part, you can. Or you can watch the rest of the lesson and move on to the last part. I want to go back to our goal, which our goal was to make inferences about poems using text evidence and define and identify repetition and alliteration. We just did that part of making inferences using text evidence within the poem Wishes. We identified repetition and alliteration in the first poem, Ask Aiden, and we did some work on that in our journals. The last thing you're going to do is work on writing about it on your own. So you're going to write some of your own questions and take those questions and assemble them into a poem using answers similar to the poems we've already looked at today, more similar to the poem Wishes. Now, I've done an example for you. Activity page 2.3 says, in Wishes, the speaker dreams of becoming king. Write the job you would most like to have. Obviously, I'm doing my dream job of being a teacher. But if I was pretending to be a different job, something I always wanted to do was be a marine biologist. So then it's going to ask you to write several questions to ask yourself about that job. If you want to use my questions, you can use my questions. So I have questions in the boxes for you. How can you get there? What are your hopes and dreams? What is getting in your way? What is it you feel like you need? And why is this something you want to have? Right? So then you're gonna write those questions. You can use mine or you can write your own questions. It's totally up to you. And then the next thing you're gonna do is go in and answer those questions. Bonus point if you can make your answers rhyme. They do not have to rhyme. All right. We're just now starting this unit. Poetry is a tough skill. If you want to make them rhyme, you can. You don't have to make them rhyme. I'm going to show you what you need to do with a couple examples. I'm going to answer my first question. How can you get there? So if I was wanting to be a marine biologist, how can I get there? I would answer that question saying, by studying hard at school and everywhere. So I'm answering that question by studying hard at school and everywhere. So that way, I'm answering it. I tried to rhyme. How can you get there? By studying hard at school and everywhere. What are your hopes and dreams? I'm going to use a slant rhyme with E. I'm going to say, to learn about sharks and fish and streams. Streams are water marine biology, right? It's actually not even slant rhyme. I was going to say and things, but I think streams works better to answer my question. And then what is getting in your way? I'm going to say my fear of the ocean every day. I'm afraid to get in the ocean. I would love to be a marine biologist, but I don't mind swimming near the beach, but I've been in the big open water one time. It freaks me out. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to answer my questions one at a time. And when that's done, I can read it as a poem. How can you get there? By studying hard at school and everywhere. What are your hopes and dreams? To learn about sharks and fish in streams. What is getting in your way? My fear of the ocean every day. I have two more, but for the sake of your time, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to let you work on again. If you want to use my questions, feel free to use my questions. If you don't want to use my questions and you would prefer to write your own questions, you can do that as well. So as a reminder, our goal was making inferences about poems using text evidence, defining and identifying repetition and alliteration. We did those things today. If you need to go back and rewatch them as you're doing your work, you can. I want to give you a quick reminder of you need to do 2.3, 2.2, and 2.1 all. You're going to turn those in to your teacher tomorrow after the e-learning day. Hope you guys have been able to work hard throughout the day. You get a little bit extra time to do something you enjoy, and we will see you back at school tomorrow. Good job, guys. Thank you.